everybody.
So I know that Oprah is supposed to do the talking first because you're the interviewer.
Yes.
But truth in advertising, initially, when we scheduled this event, I asked Bradley Cooper to interview me. And something came up in Bradley Cooper's life, and he couldn't make it. And I turned to a dear old friend, Oprah Winfrey, who decided to do me and all of you a huge favor. And we, so thank you. And we thought, it's okay with you, we're going to begin with a little duet called Shallow.
In the shallow, la 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 la. Yes. Well, I never want to apologize for being myself, but I'm sorry for all of you who really wanted to see Bradley Cooper. This is what you got tonight. All right. I have to say, how are you feeling? I've heard you say several times now in other shows that you're a little embarrassed writing a book and that you're basically an introvert. I know you basically to be an introvert. And now we're sitting here on stage with your big picture blown up in front of everybody.
I'm not going to look.
Which is, no, take a look at it. You look good up there. Yeah, which is about the least introverted thing you could do. So how are you feeling about this whole process of having to talk about a book?
Out-of-body experience, it feels like that's some other guy. But I was supposed to retire this year, and I've been asked for years about what the secret of my success is, mostly from young people who are starting out in the business. Could I impart the lessons that I learned? And I like talking to people about that. Not that what happened to me and what worked for me would work for everyone else, but it's certainly nice to give people some insights about how I got where I am, and maybe it'll help them along the way. So I thought this would be a great way to tell my story. I like telling stories, even though I'm introverted. And in doing so, impart those lessons. It's kind of an efficient way to do it. And off I went. And then I didn't retire, and that made it just a little bit more complicated, both from a time management perspective and also in terms of the perspective I provided, because I didn't want to seem like I was patting myself on the back. I thought if I left, I could look back on the career and give myself a little pat on the back for what had been accomplished by the company. But when you're still doing it, it makes it a little bit harder.
I think you did an excellent job. And I wouldn't tell you if you didn't do an excellent job. I just wouldn't say anything. But
I know you well enough to know that.
Yeah, I think you did an excellent job. And may I say to all of you, he actually wrote the book himself, which is very unusual in today's time.
Yeah, well, I had a little help and ended up with my name on it, but I got a little help along the way from a man named Joel Lovell, who I think is here somewhere, but got me started on it, helped me organize it, gave me some good thoughts, and off we went.
Well, a couple of years ago, I think it was actually a Hollywood Reporter was asking people, who would you want to trade places with? And I said, you. If you could trade places for a day, who would it be? And I said Bob Iger, because he's actually president of the happiest place on earth, and he gets to run that whole happiness universe. And then after reading Ride of a Lifetime, I changed my mind about that.
Why?
Because I don't, even after reading it, I don't actually know how you do it all. I mean, it's Pixar, and it's Marvel, and it's Star Wars, and it's all the other things that go along with over 200,000 employees, and you're in 157 million visitors a year and 12 amusement parks. So I don't even know, how do you compartmentalize? Like, you get up in the morning and your brain is doing what?
Well, you have to start with putting together a good team, because a company this size with this much in this many businesses and this much complexity, you can't possibly do it all yourself. Not one person can do that. And so you build a team, and the team gets built over time, or you take really good people and you give them opportunities, and you let them make decisions, whether they're creative decisions or business decisions, and kind of off they go. And then what I do is I give them the room to operate and run these businesses, because some of these businesses are huge businesses in their own right. A theme park business, which is 6 different locations around the world and 4 cruise ships and 3 more to go, and a resort in Hawaii, and Lord knows and how many hotels we have and restaurants, et cetera. That's a big business unto itself. So you let them do that, and then what I do is I try to determine really 3 things. First of all, there are things I must do as a CEO. I have to go to board meetings and do earnings calls and all that stuff. There are things I have to get involved with because of their sheer size, mostly the level of investment, the statement that it might make, or the responsibility associated with a big initiative. And the third, I try to get involved where I really believe I can make a difference. I've been around business now for 45 years. I've been in creative parts of the business for a long time. And so if I really think that by putting my touch on something, I can either help make it better or exhort people who are making it to be better, I do that. And there's a 4th category, which I only have learned to do more as I've gotten older, and that's what do I really enjoy doing. I have the ability actually to decide occasionally, what's going to be fun for me.
So how many people actually get to, when you say you've built the team, so is that team of 20 people or 40 people that regularly interact with you?
Well, it's 10 people.
It's 10 people.
Yes, that I see every week in some form and speak to. Certainly I speak to every one of them almost every other day, sometimes every day. We try to meet once a week face-to-face if our travel schedules allow, and we share a lot together. And one of the things about Disney that's unique is because these brands are brands that stretch across or span across so many of our businesses. A movie, a Star Wars movie that becomes a theme park attraction and consumer products and soon a Star Wars themed hotel and television shows touches so many businesses that they're galvanizing forces that bring all people together and force a level of collaboration and cooperation. So that helps a lot too. But basically what I try to do is I interact with them regularly. One of the things I know helps them a lot is I tell them what my priorities are and what I expect of them and of the company. And that gives them an ability to go off and operate with a little bit more kind of a roadmap of sorts of what's expected. And then I also engage with a level of people below them, particularly on the creative side. So if we're making a big movie, Star Wars I'll bring up again, I will see early cuts of the film with the director and get involved in script reading and give some input along the way because it's just something that I've done for a long time and I also enjoy doing it.
And so I have to tell you all, Bob and I were together a couple of weeks ago for an interview that'll be on Super Soul Sunday, this coming Sunday, just in case you want to know what time it is. And I have to tell everyone this. So from the time you sat in the seat, you noticed this, and so did the producer and everyone else. From the time you came, sat in the seat, because I do it in my backyard, and we did the interview, we had a little lunch afterwards. You know what I noticed? You never picked up your phone once. You never picked up your phone during the entire
Well, I was being interviewed.
I know, but no, in between the commercial break, in between things that we were doing around, you never picked up your phone once. The entire time we were at lunch, you never picked up your phone once, and you didn't pick up your phone until you got in the car. I noticed when you got in the car and the door was closed.
I wish my sons behaved that way when they were with me.
So I'm wondering, how do you do all of this? How many people can go, that's like 4 hours, and not...
That's unusual for me.
That's unusual.
I don't know whether I was anxious about it or not. I don't recall. It might have been a particularly quiet day. One of the things I have to be mindful of is because we have so many moving parts and so much can happen at our company, good and bad, I do have to be tied. I have to be accessible and available in a variety of ways. So I'm typically very good at communicating with people via email.
Well, I couldn't understand because he's also the kind of guy, if you send an email, you get an answer back. Every time it happens, I'm like, I can't believe I got
Except when I'm being interviewed by you.
You didn't get one back.
I try to concentrate. I think one of the secrets you asked about compartmentalization, I think one of the ways you do that is when you choose to take on a subject, you have to do so with real concentration. First of all, you have to go into, you have to go into it with some degree of knowledge.
Do you have rules like a lot of people could use about putting your phone down? Do you not allow phones at the dinner table, or do you have rules about when?
My wife Willow and I are here. My wife Willow is here. We have boys who are almost 21 and 17. Phones do not come to the table. Now they're big sports fans, so we always hear that ESPN noise about sports alerts, which drives us crazy. But we don't take phones to the table. And in meetings at Disney, I never pick up a device. I try, if someone is presenting to me or we're covering a subject that's important, often I don't bring the device to the meeting. I leave it in my office.
Yeah.
Because I lose concentration.
I think that's one of the reasons why people have such regard for you, because I think you are one of those few people that when you are in your presence, that person feels like they're the most important person. And I've seen you do it many times. Like you go up to people and say, "Hi, my name is Bob," like people don't know who you are.
I don't wear the name. I wear the name tag at the parks.
Hi, my name is Bob.
I had a boss that treated me that way. I felt every time I went into his office, I felt like I was the most important person in the company.
Which boss?
His name was Dan Burke. He was.
Oh, Dan Burke. Okay.
And I realized at some point that everybody in the company felt like they were the most important person at the company when they met him.
Yes.
That wasn't just me, but it was a characteristic that I tried to emulate because it was so empowering to people. Just you left his office feeling so good. Even, by the way, if he gave you some difficult feedback about something, it came from a place within him. He cared, he was focused on you, and he just made you feel worthwhile. And I think when people make you feel worthwhile or make you feel like there's something valuable within you, it unlocks your ability to do a lot more. You're much more confident. You can even be more curious. And again, being valued is an important thing in life.
Yeah, I think it's one of the greatest things you can do as a boss. The other thing that comes through really clearly in Ride of a Lifetime is that you are one of those people who actually sees a crisis and your perspective immediately shifts that you're not in the crisis. You see a crisis as a puzzle. And is that something that we can learn, or is that just the way you're wired?
Well, I think I'm probably wired to deal with crises in some form, but in all of these years, particularly at a senior leadership position at a company like this, you learn a lot too, meaning you learn how to, as you mentioned earlier, compartmentalize. You learn how to process things either inwardly or outwardly, because sometimes that's a very different set of dynamics, where what you're processing inside isn't necessarily what people see outside. I think you just get more practice, you get better at it. But one of the important things in a company like this, because there are crises that occur, unfortunately, somewhat often, is figuring out how to prioritize them, how to deal with them, not seeming to be overwhelmed by them or overly anxious, knowing when it is the equivalent of a code red circumstance. You call it that, and you get all hands on deck to deal with it.
But also, you say you were not born with the fear gene.
Typically I'm not all that fearful. I don't know why that is. Maybe there's a resilience that I learned along the way as a child. We talked when I met you a few weeks ago, and it's in the book. My dad had a severe issue with depression, manic depression. His mood swings were up and down. I had to learn to deal with that. That might have contributed to it.
Not only learn to deal with it, but anybody here who's had to grow up in a family where somebody had mental illness, you have to learn how to clock their moods. And one of the things you say is that you could tell when he came into the door, the way the doorknob clicked and the way he moved into the room, whether it was a good dad or not so good.
And I lived on the second floor of a house, and his bedroom was a floor up, and I could tell just by the sound of his feet on the stairs whether he was in a good mood or not. And I think when I heard the bad mood sound, I probably steeled myself in some form, or I prepared for it. And we're talking about this, it sounds like it was like left a terrible scar on me. Actually, he was a very supportive dad, a very loving dad. I learned a lot from him. And I do think I picked up the ability to be just a little bit more resilient.
Well, yes, but not only resilient, because one of my beliefs is that nothing in our life is ever wasted, that everything that has happened to you has also happened for you. So I'm wondering whether or not being raised by a father who had mental illness at a time where nobody even called it that, do you think that made you more discerning when you walk into a room now and being able to clock people and read people?
I don't know the answer to that. Maybe, perhaps, I'm not sure. I mean, I think one thing it has made me aware of is what are my moods when I walk into a room.
Well, good.
I can control.
Willow and the family appreciate that. Willow and the boys, yeah.
I did say, it was in another interview that was done, that I used to get mad when Willow, my wife, left cabinets open in the kitchen. I don't do that anymore. Just too small, you know. Why the small
Life's too
stuff?
short.
Because life's too short. Don't sweat the small stuff. We do that way too often in life.
Well, everybody seems to think you're pretty perfect, Bob. They
I'm
really
pretty
do.
human.
Yeah, but very human. But I want to know, I should have asked Willow this before we went out here, but what would Willow's pet peeve, number one pet peeve, be about you? You outed her in the Maureen Dowd article yesterday about the cabinets.
Yes.
So what would her number one pet be? Maybe it's not anymore, because at this point you've resolved all the pet peeves.
No.
What would it have been?
I throw out newspapers prematurely. I don't like that pile. She likes the pile to build up. No one's reading these. Off they go. And then immediately you get caught. Did you throw those newspapers out? I don't know.
Yeah.
Darling? No, she won't reveal that.
No. You know what else is interesting? Those of you who read the article in the New York Times that Maureen Dowd did, you mentioned that you warmed her milk. And immediately I thought, so you get up at what, 4:30 in the morning?
4:15.
4:15.
I have a lot to do. Big company.
Yeah. So
That's when I do my email.
is that when you do your emails? Okay.
I actually try not to do my email right away.
Really? So you don't open your email. What's the morning ritual?
This is very personal. I work out in the house every morning before I go to work.
So you get up to work out.
I get up to work out, try to be as quiet as possible.
But you said
On my way to get working out, I actually take a coffee cup mug out for her and heat warm milk. Now she gets up at 4:45.
Well, thank you for clearing that up, because I was thinking, well, if she's getting up at 7, that milk's going to be
Yeah.
cold. Very nice
We're really
little
getting into the
gesture,
substance.
but the milk's going to be cold by the time she gets up. Okay, you all got that all worked out. Yes.
So, you know, sometimes it's those little things you do for your loved ones that go a long way,
Yeah.
showing you care.
I say foreplay begins in the kitchen. It does. It does.
That's great advice.
The one thread that runs clearly through Ride of a Lifetime is your ability to project optimism. And one of the things you say is nobody wants a pessimist for a boss.
Yes.
So is...
That guy that tells you the sky is falling,
Yes, all the time.
please, that's not a way to rally the troops, you know. Really, when you think about it, if you're facing a problem or a major challenge or a new initiative where the outcome is uncertain, you have to basically face it or contend with it with a degree of confidence and a degree of optimism. I think there still has to be an injection of realism into the process. You can't seem like an idiot. Oh, everything's going to be great when
Right.
you're in the middle of a hurricane. But if you're in the middle of a storm...
But you get calmer. You're one of those guys, when the hurricane comes, you get calmer, right? You get still, you get calm, you get that swagger, you get... Right?
No, you said it earlier. You look at it as a big puzzle. Okay, how will we contend with this? What's the first thing we have to do, and the second thing we have to do, and the third, and where do we have to get to?
Yeah.
How do we get there? And I think you should approach most problems that way.
Well, you begin the book talking about one of the most tragic, horrid things that had ever happened at Disney, and you write about it so candidly. And that was, in my opinion, one of the most classic cases of having to compartmentalize and manage at the same time. Can you describe for the
Yes, and I
audience what was
started the
happening?
book with that story purposely, and we'll come back to that. But in 2016, June of 2016, we were opening Disneyland in Shanghai. It was roughly a $6 billion project. First time we were bringing one of our theme parks to the mainland China. And I had worked on it for 18 years. I first set foot on the property in 1998. And here it was, 2016, through all kinds of difficult negotiations and changes of political regime and issues with contractors and discussions about just about every detail possible, and we were opening Shanghai Disneyland. And I made 40 trips to Shanghai in the process. And this was June of '16. I had made 11 between January and June, and I was spent. But I believed that it would be the highlight and maybe the highest point of my entire career, and a really high moment for the Walt Disney Company to bring a theme park to China, particularly with all the challenge. And I thought it actually meant a lot to the world, too, because Disneyland is such an American icon. And here we were planting that flag in the most populous city in the most populous country. And so as we were readying that opening week, and I was giving a tour to dignitaries, including members of the board and senior members of our team and creative partners, George Lucas was there. The first thing that happened was there was an attack on a nightclub in Orlando that killed, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 people. And we found out that there were people that we knew, people who had worked for us that were there. And we also found out that we had been the primary target. But
because Disney has a system, tell them about that if something happens anywhere in the world.
Right, if anything happens, there could be a big fire, a plane crash, a terrorist attack. We track our employees very carefully, and they know that and they appreciate that. And we do that so that if we have to go in and help them, pull them out of harm's way or assist them in any way, we want to know where they are and whether they're okay. And so I got immediate reports about that. But I also got a report that we were the primary target for the attacker. But we had a hardened target that night. We had a concert, and there was more security, more police presence there, and so he went to another nightclub.
But he had gone to Disney first.
He was there that day, that night. Yeah, he was there that night, and when they found his phone.
How do you all know that?
They found his phone, and one of the things they did immediately was figure out where the phone had been. And they found that it was pinging off a cell tower on our property for 2 hours earlier that night. So, and we then found closed-circuit footage of him walking past the entrance to a place, a House of Blues that is on our property. And then we found footage of him as we got into it more, not that week, but we looked into it more. He had been there a couple of times earlier, looking at it as well. But we had a concert there that night that required more security, and when he saw the security, there was a greater presence than he had seen when he had been there before. He went somewhere else. So that was incident one, but in fairness, while we did have some people involved, what you were referring to is what happened a couple of days later.
So I'm just trying to set the scene. So this had happened. Everybody is, because your security person that was with you in Shanghai now goes back.
Head of our park in Orlando.
Yeah.
We sent back to Orlando to deal with the aftermath of the attack because so many people, we have 75,000 employees there. So everybody knew somebody. Yes, we lost a couple of former employees and part-time employees, and I think someone that worked for us was injured, but so many people that worked for us had loved ones or friends that were either shot or killed. Mm-hmm. But then a couple of days later, while I was giving a tour to these dignitaries, the head of our Parks and Resorts team came up to me, pulled me aside, and said, an alligator attacked a child at Disney World. And that's when I had to put on a game face of sorts. I could not show horror because I was just in the middle of this tour, and it was an important one, and I didn't want to change that mood. And I said to him, get more information. He said, well, they don't have a body. He didn't have any more information except he knew exactly where it took place at Disney World. And he told me it was the Grand Floridian Hotel. I've stayed there a number of times. I immediately knew the beach that it took place on. And then we went into another crisis mode and immediately determined that a family had been on the beach. Matt and Melissa Graves were the parents, and 2 kids, a daughter and a son named Lane, and an alligator at dusk was prowling the shores, and the boy had a pail that he filled with water to play with sand toys, and the alligator attacked and took him. And we found out, I think it was less than a day later when they recovered the body and confirmed, obviously, that he was gone.
And his parents were right there.
They watched it happen. They watched it happen. And that was on a Wednesday. And on Thursday, which is the day we were opening the park, I decided a few hours before the opening that I needed to first put out a statement from me. I didn't want an unnamed corporate spokesperson to say something about it. I wanted it to come from a person with a name and a face and a job, and that was me. I took full responsibility.
What were your lawyers saying? Weren't they saying, don't do that?
Well, they,
'Cause that is
lawyers
not
are
good. That is not
lawyers are typically trained to reduce a company's exposure from a
Right.
liability perspective. But our general counsel, a man named Alan Braverman, someone I've worked with closely since 1992, is a lawyer and a businessman and a human being. And when I went to him, and Azenya Muku, who's here, is our head of corporate communications, and said, I need to put out a statement, they immediately understood that. So there was no resistance. I think companies often face that kind of resistance. I've not found that. And then I decided, after putting out the statement, to see if I could get the parents on the phone. And I asked Xenia, who's here, get me a phone number, and she got me a number of parents, had a friend that was with them, and I called his number, and I explained who I was and where I was, and I knew that he was with the parents, and I asked if I could speak with him, and I did. And then I had to go, then I was so teary that I remember losing my contact lenses. I then had to get ready to cut a ribbon with the vice premier of China in front of thousands of people there and a television audience that spanned China, and read a letter from President Obama and put on my game face and read Mandarin too, which I wouldn't have been good at anyway.
But when you called the
Yeah.
parents?
I didn't have a script. I had no idea what I was going to say, but I knew that I had to express.
Didn't you call at the advice of people telling you not to call?
No. I think what I wrote is typically you'd get advice not to do that, but I did not get any resistance. When I asked for the number, I got the number in minutes, and I think my team knew what I felt I had to do, and they were completely with me. And I think it actually.
What do you say?
Well, I'm the grandfather now of 5 kids. I think I had 4 then, and I have 4 children of my own. And I immediately, after telling them who I was and where I was, I immediately said, as the grandparent of 4 kids then, and the parent of 4 children, I could not fathom what they were experiencing and what they were going through.
Did they want to talk to you?
Yes, I said, when their friend answered the phone, I told them who it was, and I said, they may not want to talk to me, but if they don't, I'd like to say something to you. And he said, no, they'd like to talk to you. And I said what I just said, and then I said, if there's anything I can possibly do for you, our team was with them. We have a great crisis team there. And if there's anything I can possibly do for you, here's my number. Please let me know. And Matt Graves, the father, said to me, and he was amazingly composed, and he said, yes, there's something I'd like you to do. And I said, what is that? And he said, I want you to promise me that you will do everything possible to prevent this from ever happening to another child. And so that my son Lane's life will not have been lived in vain. And I got off the phone, and I got my team together, and we started trying to determine what were the circumstances that even created this horrible occurrence, horrible attack. There are over 1 million alligators in Florida, and we have a piece of property there that's twice.
Did you all hear that? There are over 1 million alligators in Florida.
I learned a lot, actually. But we have a piece of property more than twice the size of Manhattan there, with a lot of water, a lot of places where alligators live. And in the 45 years the business was in existence, I wasn't aware that there had been any other incidents. And so while we had signs up that said no swimming, there weren't any signs up that said no swimming alligators. And I think when some people see a sign that says no swimming, you'll let a kid go into the water and with a shovel, maybe in a pail. If it said no swimming alligators, it would make a big difference. But what we also discovered was it's very, very difficult to keep alligators far from people because they're strong and they're resourceful. But you can do a lot to keep people away from them, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
So we bought all of the rope and all of the wood and all of the possible signage that we could buy immediately, and we got hundreds of people working to begin the process that I had promised Matt Graves I would begin, and the promise that I had made.
Did you maintain contact with them? Have you talked with them since?
Yes, I I met with him face-to-face once. I haven't gone into details because the meeting was so personal and so intimate in a way in terms of what we talked about.
Why did you meet with them?
As an extension of wanting to put a human being behind a big company, I thought that I should give them the ability to meet with me personally, to either express more if they wanted to, and for me to give them an update on what we had done. And they readily accepted my offer to come visit them, which I did. And I've kept in contact with them. I actually called Matt Graves before the book came out to tell him that I was going to tell the story and to make sure that it was okay with him. And he was perfectly supportive of it, which was nice of him. They have a foundation. They're trying to help other kids, particularly kids who are in need of organ transplants of some sort and who need help. It's a great cause in their son's name, the Lane Graves Foundation. And we've helped this foundation as well.
Was this the hardest thing you had to do as a CEO?
Yes. I think it was the hardest for a number of reasons. There was something so horrible about the attack and the loss, and it came at a time when it was supposed to be such an up moment for me and for the company. And I think that comparison or juxtaposition made it so much more difficult and emotional. And I wrote about it, I purposely put it at the beginning of the book, not just to grab people early, but I wanted to describe what I do in not just happy, and your point earlier about happiest place on earth, in easy and glowing terms, but to try to say, this is a big company. Yes, we're in the business of manufacturing happiness and entertaining the world, but it doesn't mean managing those businesses is happy all the time. And in fact, with the footprint that we have and the contact that we have with human beings around the world, there's an inevitability to tough things or bad things happening. And I have to deal with a lot of them in this position.
You knew Steve Jobs probably better than anybody. And that happened because you dared make a phone call after you became head of Disney.
Yeah.
And there had been not such good feelings prior to that.
I knew Steve Jobs well. I wasn't as close to Steve. I consider him a good friend, but there are others that were closer, including his wife. When I became CEO, we had a long relationship with Pixar, a partnership in making, I think we had made 3 or 4 films with them, including the first 2 Toy Story films, Monsters and Incredibles and Nemo, so it was 5 films. Oh, and Bug's Life, 6. I remember all these things. And the relationship got really frayed. Happened over a variety of circumstances, tough negotiations, some battles on the creative side, the clash of egos, a shift of leverage, you name it. I thought the relationship was critical to Disney, in particular because animation is so important to the Walt Disney Company. So when I got the job, when I was named, I didn't know Steve well, but I called him and said, I'm the new CEO. I'd love to come see you and talk about the relationship. And it's typical Steve fashion. He said, how long have you been the number 2 at Disney? I said, 5 years. And he said, why should I think you're going to be any different than the guy who was in the job I didn't like? And I said, well, I just like the chance to prove that I'm different. And he said, well, when the dust settles, come up. That led to a series of events that ultimately led me to have the guts to call Steve a few months later and say, I have a crazy idea. He said, what's that? I said, what about Disney buying Pixar? He was the largest shareholder of Pixar, owned half of it, controlling shareholder. And I was really nervous when I made that call because he could just be...
You who don't get rattled ever?
Sort of like one of those, I don't know, little kid and standing in front of like some big authority figure. That's how I felt.
Really?
Yeah, for that moment, sure. This was Steve Jobs. He was pretty cool and powerful and successful and whatever. Changed the world.
Yeah, he did.
Me. And he said, well, wait a minute, we had already developed a trust. It's a long story. It is in the book, but how I got there. But he knew that I liked technology and I was a big Apple fan and I had all kinds of iTunes playlists, and he hadn't met anybody on my side of the business like that. So he said, no, come on up and we'll talk about it. And I was shocked. And That ultimately led to a negotiation and my having to convince the Disney board. I had just become CEO to spend $7.4 billion. The first meeting I had with the board of directors, I said, I've got a crazy idea. I don't advise, whenever you become CEO of a company, in your first meeting with the board, do not recommend a $7+ billion acquisition.
Well, many people have read the Jobs book. What could you tell us about him that we wouldn't find in a book, that we'd be surprised?
Well, I'll finish that story and lead to answering that question, because what ultimately happened there is an hour before we were announcing the acquisition of Pixar, we were in Emeryville at the Pixar headquarters. That's in Northern California near Berkeley. And we had a press conference planned, and we were going to face the world and tell them we had done this big deal. And Steve asked me to go for a walk. I had no idea why. We sat on a bench at Pixar. He put his arm around me. He said, I'm going to tell you something only my wife and my doctor knows. And I said, what's that? He said, well, my cancer has returned. He had had cancer a couple of years earlier, announced that he was cured. It was back. And I asked, why are you telling me this? He said, I'm giving you a chance to back out of the deal. I look at my watch. I realize the clock is ticking on this big announcement. Had no idea what to do, had no one to turn to, could not, as I said today in an interview, couldn't phone a friend. You know, he said, it's confidential. And I decided to stick with it and do the deal. And we then became really close, and I got the opportunity to see sides of Steve that I think a lot of people don't see, including a very kind, generous side, and a friendly side. We really became good friends, talked about family and shared music and walked beaches in Hawaii together. But we also talked a lot about the intersection of technology and creativity and art. It said he used to say it would make his heart sing. He loved how art touched technology, what art could do with what could be done with art using great technology, and vice versa. And
Tell the story of taking you to the product room.
Yes, so one of the great things I used to be able to do is he would take me to the Apple Design Lab. And you go through 4 or 5 doors and all these buttons and cards and exactly what you'd expect. And you get into a room and it'd be a bunch of tables with blankets on them. Just blankets, nice blankets, Apple blankets. And he'd pull a blanket off and there'd be all these new devices that he hadn't shown the world, and he'd show me. And every once in a while, and I would see a side to him that was so genius. He would, for instance, he would say, put your ear down to this, and it would be the power connecting cord when it was a magnet that fit in to a laptop. He'd say, listen to this. Click, 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 click. Yes? Don't you love that sound? He loved that sound. And he'd say, that sound tells the user that the connection has been made. It's like convenient, you don't have to even think twice. Is this in? Will it charge? Of course it's charging. I heard the sound. And those devices, to this day, have a number of those elements. How you put your fingers into a laptop to open the top, and the angle of the little indentation there, and the feel of the material, the color of the material, the light that is used, the material that's used in everything. He had this eye for design. And like what I said about the intersection of art and technology, he also knew the importance of design and technology. And it differentiates the Apple product today. And it's not just the front, it's the back, as he used to say. Not just the front of the computer, it's
He was
the
a
back.
guy who loved the clicks. I love that story about
He was a click
hear
man.
that. So,
But to watch that, to see that enthusiasm, that energy, that eye, that sense of taste, that awareness of the physical and what it meant to emotions, it's just an amazing thing.
but I know it's something that we admire in you, this striving for excellence at all cost, all the time.
Not at all cost, but
Well, at
a lot of cost.
a lot of cost. And you tell the story about being at a Japanese restaurant,
Yes. In Japan, in Tokyo, there's a restaurant called...
because this applies to all levels.
Yes.
Steve Jobs, to you, to everyone. Thank you. Go ahead.
The notes are in. The votes are in, rather. There's a sushi chef in Tokyo named Jiro. It was a famous documentary, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And I watched the documentary, and then he was, I think, 88. He's now, I think, 93. And he had 3 Michelin stars, tiny restaurant, and he was still striving to get better. And there was a term used called shokunin, a Japanese term, which is the relentless pursuit of perfection. I was just obsessed with that concept and actually went to have dinner at his restaurant, which was an experience. He's still there. His son is taking over, but he's still making sushi. By the way, he fed me 19 pieces of sushi in 35 minutes. And he did so because the rice needs to be body temperature. And the longer you take to eat, the lower the temperature of the rice becomes, and you can't have that. It's a lot to eat in 35 minutes, but it was really good. But that notion of even in great success, even when you have achieved something that is good, trying to be great, really struck me as interesting as a leadership principle, because I've witnessed a lot of people along the way who settle for good when it can be great, or even accept mediocrity, which is a lot worse. So what I've tried to instill in people is, if you have time and if you have resources, and we frequently do have time and we almost always have resources, then spend the time and apply the resources to turn something that's good into something that's great. It's much easier. There's much less resistance when you stop at some point, or when you say no to something because no, I'm sorry, I'm out of time or out of money or can't make it any better. It's harder to make something great, but we have to make sure, we have to work harder to do that.
Why have you been able to bring the level of success? I know that you talk many times in Ride of a Lifetime about learning from Roone Arledge, innovate or die. Is that the reason why you think Disney is now?
Well, I had some great mentors.
Yes.
Michael Eisner was one. Roone Arledge, who ran ABC Sports when I worked there for 13 years, was another. Tom Murphy and Dan Burke, I mentioned Dan earlier, others. I learned a lot from them. Among them, one of them, Roone, was an unbelievable perfectionist that didn't just have to eat sushi to learn the power of perfection.
But I love that you included the sushi story, because it applies to anybody in any line of work, no matter what you're doing. Never settle for what is the mediocre. Always go for whatever is the best you can do.
It's also amazing when you're managing processes. The gentleman at one of the men at our studio, a man named Sean Bailey, who supervised the development and the making of our most recent Lion King film, which was tricky because we were doing a remake of a film that was such a celebrated film in the mid-90s. And there were issues. We had a great film. Jon Favreau, the director and the creative visionary of this, it was delivering a great film, but there had been some issues just in terms of the emotion that we were getting out of some of the voices. We kept talking about it, and everybody thought it was a great film. I said, I think we can get this better. You can get more emotion out of it, and the film will be more impactful. Cost more money, took a little bit more time, and the director, Jon Favreau, applied himself and made it better. And he might have gotten there without my exhorting him to do that, so I'm not taking credit for it, but it is an example of that. Okay, we had a really good film. Let's really make it great. It's important. And this executive said to me afterward, thank you for pushing us to strive harder, to work harder. It's a great quality, I think.
I know you did the same thing for Black Panther.
Black Panther was a little different in that when Ryan Coogler delivered the film, which was brilliant, he was extremely nervous the first time we had seen it. He was 31 years old, and he had directed his first big movie. And I think he felt he had the world on his shoulders because of how much that film represented in terms of its potential to really affect culture. And I knew how nervous he was. The lights came up in the theater after he watched the movie, and I said to him, I've got a few things to say about your film that were somewhat critical, but I didn't use that word. But I need you to know this is a great film. In other words, rest assured, you're okay. Mm-hmm. You delivered something great. And it made him so, relaxed, and then open to hearing some input. And there had been some input. There were some clarity issues. There were some things we didn't quite understand. But he needed more resources to fix what we were talking about. And I think my recollection is it was a $175 million film. And we might have put 20 to 25 million more into it to give him the ability to make something that was really good already even greater. And part of that reason, the reason we did that is because we had a sense that there was a lot of responsibility on everybody's shoulders here.
I know, that was one of the happiest days. You said that was one of the happiest days at Disney.
It was. It was. Sharing that film with the world, I had seen it a number of times before we civilians had seen it. And I could not wait to show it to people. And it was at the premiere.
I bet you didn't even know that black people were going to act the way we did over it. I bet you didn't know that we were going to dress up.
I did not know that.
You did not know.
I did not know that,
like
and I was.
Africa had come home to us.
I was underdressed.
You were, yes,
I was wearing a three-piece suit, but it wasn't orange and whatever.
Yes.
I think Donald Glover came in one of the wildest outfits I had seen in a premiere. You'll never see.
No, it was something.
It was. You know, I think I put in the book, thank you very much, the email you sent me when you saw it.
Yes, you did. I got a shout out.
You did.
Yeah.
It made me feel great.
Yeah.
It was. I have had a lot of really
because you believed in it, you knew from the beginning that it could be something, you were willing to give him the money that you felt he deserved to really do
also
a big job.
Shutting the doubters up. There were a lot of people who said, you cannot make 175 or even a $200 million movie.
Because they said people are not going to look at black people in other parts of the world. And you proved them wrong.
Ryan Coogler proved them wrong.
Yeah, Ryan Coogler proved
He did it.
them
And
wrong.
that cast and that team, you know, the design team.
When's
the
2 coming out? We're ready.
2 is, Ryan's got a story. We haven't read a script yet. We have a year. I think we announced it. 21, maybe? It can't be 20, I don't think. He needs more time.
It cannot be 20. No.
No, I think it's 21. I hope so.
So that was a big happy moment. How hard was it to fire Roseanne?
Easy.
Was it? Was it?
It's easy. It's easy. I got a lot of calls on that, people saying, it must have been really hard. Why? Because it's your most popular show. It was an easy decision.
It was the #1 show, and you all can imagine it's your #1 show.
I know, but you can't say something like that publicly about someone else. And
so how did that shake
walked
out?
into my office at, I don't know, 5 or 7 in the morning, head of ABC. I think he emailed me. He might have called me. I don't remember. Told me about the tweet. She said something really nasty about Valerie Jarrett, who worked for President Obama. Someone I knew, although that didn't really matter. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? And he said, well, we're getting into it more, trying to figure out the context, et cetera, and so on. I said, I think the decision's kind of easy. It's been made for us already, you know. And we have to make it fast, because you want to make a decision like that. You want to gather the facts quickly, get everybody involved that needs to be involved quickly, and then make the decision so that it is your decision to be made and not let it be made by the public or the reaction to it. It's really important. So we knew, I don't know, 15 minutes, I said to him, after hearing about it, we know what we have to do. And we spent maybe 2 hours.
Bob, nobody said, but it's our #1 show?
I knew that it was a #1 show. I never asked what it was going to mean to the company financially. I don't even know to this day what it meant to us financially. Didn't know. Didn't matter. I mean, yeah, it matters to the bottom line, but you know, when you're a company like Disney, I think all companies should behave this way, but I think we're held.
I know in the introduction you were introduced as preferring decency over dollars. You're decent, but you got to care about the dollars.
Yes, it's a balance, but you can't sacrifice the decency for the dollars.
No,
look, we're a company.
Not if you're Disney. No.
We're so well known. No, it's true, I think,
Yeah.
because part of the brand proposition of Disney is people expect us to behave responsibly and to be a good citizen of the world. And look, we're not perfect. We're a collection of human beings. We make mistakes. Things happen. We learn from those mistakes. We try to own up to those mistakes. But I think it's really important for us to portray ourselves as a decent, human, empathetic, responsible company. And again, I'm not suggesting that we are even close to perfect, but I love, by the way, I love that standard for us.
Oh, more.
Are you
Black Panther, May 6, 2022.
2022? We have to speed that up.
Okay. Thank you.
2022 is like an...
That's a long time. Ooh, long time. All right, from Clint Salter in the audience. Where are you, Clint? Somewhere? Oh, hi. Clint wants to know, you've been CEO of Disney for 15 years. What continues to motivate you to achieve more with an already successful company?
Well, a couple of things. I love bringing the world great creativity, sharing something that your team has made or the creators that we're involved with the world, like Black Panther, like the new
So for
Star
every
Wars.
movie that we see, Bob, you have seen multiple times and given
Any
your...
big movie I've seen 4 or 5 times.
Okay.
The premiere is always hard to stay awake. Seen it all.
You're not watching every show that's on ABC.
No, I try to watch something. I try to watch some part of everything. Now, of course, we own National Geographic and FX, and we own Freeform and Disney Channel and ABC and ESPN. They make a lot of stuff.
Yeah. You can't.
And everybody is sending me stuff, the head of ESPN, hey, watch this feature on that. And then the Disney Channel folks will say, watch this first episode of that. And that's why I get up at 4:15 in the morning. I try to see a little bit of everything. Part of the reason I do that is not because I necessarily put a hand on everything. I can't possibly, but I like people to know that I care. I like the people who work for me to know I care about their work. So anyway, I still, as Steve said, technology and art makes his heart sing, creativity makes mine. The other thing is this company was founded by Walt Disney in 1923. And so we're almost 100 years old. And if you look at companies over that period of time, companies founded in 23 or earlier, there aren't many left that mean something to the world. Actually, there are very few. And to be as relevant as we are today and as important, and to bring, I'm proud of the fact that, particularly in today's world, that we bring so much goodness to the world. I think there's never been a time when people have needed entertainment more, or stories that enlighten them, make them feel good about the world themselves. So I love the position of the company in the world. That still motivates me to continue to do that work. When I walk down Main Street of one of our theme parks and I see those families coming in, and I promise you, it's not about how many balloons they've bought and how many T-shirts, et cetera. But you look at, parents with little kids and grandparents with their children and their grandchildren, and friends having a good time. That's an incredible thing. My goodness, we did this.
You got that question answered, right? All right.
That was long.
From Connor N., who is a Disney cast member. Where are you?
Ooh. Connor, where do you work?
Connor N.?
We call them, by the way, hi Connor. We call them cast members. Walt Disney called our employees cast members because a lot of the employees at the theme parks put on a show all the time for the people who came to the theme park. So we still refer to them as cast members. ABC News, they don't want to be called cast members. When I put out an email to the 230,000 folks who work for us, and as I said, folks, it's dear cast members and fellow employees. Okay.
Well, Connor wants to know.
Where do you work? Disney Streaming, you're busy.
Disney Plus.
Get you busy.
Okay. Connor says, you've mentioned giving up the opportunity to acquire Twitter because it didn't fit your idea of Disney.
Hell no.
What criteria do you look for acquisitions or projects that better fit your vision?
Well, quickly on Twitter, we looked at Twitter because we like the technology and the platform to use to reach more people in more modern ways. And we thought we could basically send folks our stuff, both marketing and full-form television and movies. But when we got into it more, we realized the responsibility to manage a business like that in today's world with all the influence, both good and bad, was too great for the Walt Disney Company to take on, and I thought ultimately it would harm our image. And frankly, I didn't want to have to deal with a lot of those problems. I could not take them lightly. And so when we look at companies that are a good strategic fit because the businesses that they're in are businesses that will enhance our businesses and our value in some form. And we look to companies that we believe, from a cultural perspective, will fit our values as well. And it's just kind of that simple.
And is this you too, Connor? You've been ahead of the curve. Was that you too? You had okay, so this was someone else who said you've been ahead of the curve when it comes to disruption of media. What's the next disruption?
Well, things are moving so fast, it's kind of hard to really comprehend what the next disruption will even look like. Right now, the disruption that we're in the middle of, which you're all part of, I'm sure, is how people get their entertainment and information, where they watch it or absorb it or see it or buy it, when they do, how much they pay. Its control or authority has shifted from the distributor and the creator to the consumer thanks to technology. So now it's all about streaming and new platforms and apps, and obviously it's the Netflix world in many respects, and we're launching on November 12th Disney Plus, which is our version, not quite of Netflix because it's narrower than Netflix, but it will include Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and National Geographic content, past, present, and ultimately future, all on an app for a subscription fee.
Ryan K. wants to know what's the most important advice to give our kids, teens, about succeeding in the age of social media. You've had to deal with it in your own house?
Wow, I think you have to be really careful in managing social media. It can be such a powerful presence in your life in a good way, connecting people, families to one another, giving you the ability to express yourself, I think in positive ways, and it could just equally be as bad. It can shape you and affect you in really negative ways, have you lose your self-esteem, your concentration, your belief in yourself, having you lose your being in touch with the truth, extremely important. So I think it has to be, and it's very, it's so tricky because I don't see a point where it's regulated anytime soon. And therefore, I think it has to be brought into your life.
You did a speech recently where you were saying Hitler would have loved social media.
I did say that. It was not; those were not my words. I was quoting somebody else, but I thought they were telling. In the social media, in the hands of people that want to do harm, that want to destroy, is an incredibly powerful weapon. And I think it can be a powerful weapon that can destroy people's lives, even among people who are not really out to destroy their lives. It's very powerful, and it's come upon us very quickly.
We see a lot of leaders that are not particularly decent human beings. And I wanted to know whether or not you think the two things are inextricably intertwined.
Power and decency?
Yeah.
I think you can be powerful and decent. I don't think decency gets in the way of exerting authority or being powerful at all. I think actually it can enhance it with love. It's complex, but I think about toughness and, can I be tough and decent? Can you give people really honest feedback and still be decent? You can. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you don't hurt them along the way, but you don't set out to hurt them. And and it's important to be aware of when you give them that. When you give them feedback, you try to project what the impact on their lives might be. Mm-hmm. I was there. I grew up in this business. Started 45 years ago as a $150 a week employee. I got a lot of feedback that made me feel less of myself. And so I try when I give feedback to think about that. The tough thing is as you get more successful and more responsibility, you get more powerful. So the power of your voice is raised significantly.
Yeah, how do you keep your ego in check?
Well, you gotta keep reminding yourself.
Yeah, how do you keep your ego in check when you are king of the forest? King of the forest.
You marry someone, or you have a partner or a spouse or whatever who keeps reminding you that when you walk into the house at night, it's not your title that precedes you. It's your body.
Yeah.
It's your,
Yeah. What do you...
You are honey. My wife does not call me chairman, But that's true. I say this in the book. If you get in the morning, you look in the mirror, you're washing your face, oh, there's my title. Come on.
But, it is true that when you walk down the hallway or somebody's in an elevator with you and they're like...
Elevators they're dangerous places.
Yeah, because...
No one wants to get on an elevator with me.
I wouldn't.
I'm at work. I get on the elevator. I can see people. Oh, I hope the door closes before I get on. I don't want to be stuck with him. And then when they are stuck with me, they go to a corner. I try to disarm them. I say, sometimes I'll say, hi, I'm Bob Iger, and they kind of think, oh, yeah.
Yes.
You had to tell me
Right.
that.
Yeah, why do you
said
think I'm in
earlier.
the corner in the elevator? Yeah.
I try to ask them, I introduce myself. It's rare that they give me their name because they get so nervous they forget it. And then I ask them what they do. You work on the second floor. What, you must be at the studio. What do you do? Try to do that.
What do you know for sure at 68 that you didn't have a clue about
That I'm retiring at 70.
48? Oh, really?
For sure?
What do you know for sure at 68 that you didn't
I'm
have a
still
clue about
learning.
at 48?
48, I wasn't CEO of the Walt Disney Company. So I know for sure that I'm that. Oh, boy, that's a good question. Well, I answered quick. I know that with this success and this notoriety and this title, that while it has changed my life in many ways for the good, it hasn't changed my life completely. It's still who I was at 48, without ever having been named CEO.
And I know you,
I hope.
I know you thought for a moment, seriously a little bit, about running for president. When you see all of the nominees up there lined up speaking, is there ever a hint of you that says, I should have done it? Because I had said to Bob Iger that I would quit whatever I was doing and I would go canvas in Brooklyn. And I was looking forward to knocking on people's doors and people saying, Oprah, what are you doing here? And I'd say, I want to tell you about my friend Bob Iger, who's running for president.
Sell the book instead.
Okay.
I did consider it. I had some people come forward and tell me they thought it would be a good idea. I believed actually that Washington and the country was ready for an outsider. This is actually before Donald Trump got elected, but I considered again after he got elected. Willow, who's here, as I said, her initial response to any thought of my running for any office was, you can run for anything, but not with this wife. It's a great way of saying, don't try.
Don't try it.
She became more open-minded about it, basically saying that if it's something I really wanted to do, she would stand with me. But she did not think it was good for me, her, or our children, and it came really from her heart. I ultimately decided not to because I decided to stay with Disney longer because we made the acquisition of 21st Century Fox. So when I look at the candidates today, I do not project myself on that stage. I was at a point where I was having anxiety dreams about being on a debate stage and forgetting what the capital of Hungary was or something. Not that it seems to matter anymore.
Yeah. Nobody's going to ask that question.
Who cares?
Yes.
I was actually studying things. I was studying trade and taxation and healthcare and capitals of the world and you name it. So I have no anxiety anymore about that. And what is will be, or what will be, in terms of.
So no anxiety. You never think I should have. Okay, final question. I know you all got to get out. This has been wonderful with Bob. I love him. Just love him.
You know,
when you read the book, you're going to.
One thing, I'm selling the book because I not only want to impart lessons to people, but Willow and I are setting up scholarships for students who are studying journalism and communications to foster diversity in that field, which that field could really use. So that's where all the proceeds are going.
I just wanted to end with this question, though. One of the stories you tell in the book, you know, when I was a kid, my grandmother used to stick gum. There's an old country song about the gum on the bedpost at night. So I was raised, you know, in
Does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost?
Yes. You know
I'm of that era.
Okay.
I could sing the song when
So my grandmother actually used to do that, and I grew up like really afraid of gum. And I have a rule at my company that you cannot chew gum in front of me. It just gives me the creeps. And Bob tells a story in Ride of a Lifetime. One of his first jobs was working as a young janitor, kind of.
Summers.
Summers.
So the school district that I lived in.
Yes.
Hired extra people in the summer to prepare the school for the new school year.
Yeah.
And I was 15, 16 years old. And one of the things they said, it was a big public junior high school. There were a lot of desks.
And your
Start
job
in
was
this classroom and scrape the gum off the bottom of every desk till you're done. And then I discovered that when I finished, I had to clean like the heaters in every room too. And I like scraping gum better than cleaning the heaters. But yes, I did that.
But
That was
scraping gum is, for me, would be the worst job possible.
I'd use one of those like putty knives or something.
Don't even mention it, because the thought of it makes me feel like, ugh. But from scraping gum, Bob, I'm getting to a point. Scraping gum to literally the ride of a lifetime.
Well, and not forgetting that I scraped gum for a couple of summers.
Yes. What is the thing that when you are in your quietest moment, you are most grateful for?
Well, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be in this business. It's a fun business to be in. To be at this company and to run this company in this day, extremely grateful. But I also have a really fine life outside of this company, a great wife, 4 great kids, 5 grandchildren, and a life after Disney that I have no idea where it's going to take me, but I'm grateful for the life that I have, well beyond the title and the picture and all that.
Yeah, I'm thinking if you ever do retire, maybe you'll sleep.
Will.
Okay. Will you sleep in to 7?
Probably not.
Probably not. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.